Alright, so here in Unity we're going to bring this asset in. What I've got here is the Corgi Engine. I'm only really using this because it's giving us a more interesting space to work with. So you could definitely do this, follow along with this tutorial just by bringing your asset into a blank scene in Unity. Certainly, the purpose of this tutorial obviously is a workflow for how to bring assets into Unity. In this case though, I want to just demo this particular platformer. Now, before we get started, I'm assuming that if you're following along and have the same content that I've got here, you'll be using the Corgi Engine. So if you've purchased this, it's just a matter of obviously logging into your Asset Store account. So under Window, we have the Asset Store and the Package Manager. So by opening this, making sure you're logged into your Unity account where you've purchased the Corgi Engine from, you can go through and download and install that. Now that's really straightforward. There is documentation here on how to install, and you can go to the official website. So this is the Corgi Engine. If we go to the documentation, which is online, this has obviously instructions on how to install and detailed explanation of all the elements of the engine. On top of that, there is also, as the README says, there's an API documentation if you want to get down into the core elements and start looking at the coding. The company that makes Corgi Engine, More Mountains, have a fantastic YouTube with quite a lot of tutorials, step-by-step, how to use the Corgi Engine. So that's not the point of this tutorial at all. I'm not trying to teach you how to use Corgi, I'm trying to teach you how to bring assets into Unity, and in this particular case, I just want to bring them into this little demo of the Corgi Engine. So I'm not going to go through how to install it. Now once you've got it up and running, so basically what we're looking at here is the default level. So in the project window here, we can see we've got under Corgi Engine, and then we've got demos. And then here is the two sections. Now Corgi Engine is a 2D engine. It's designed for primarily 2D platformers. It isn't using physics. And this is really important. This allows for very clean, efficient platformer style gameplay. It means if you wanted to do something like, say, an Angry Birds clone where you're having physics reactions, items that can bounce into each other, this won't work very well at all for you. It's not the right engine for that. But for platforming games, this is fantastic. The 2D is really where it's at with the Corgi Engine. The bulk of it is built around this. And you can see there's a selection of levels that you can open up and inspect to get an idea of how it all works. But then we have Corgi 3D in this folder here. Just close the 2D. So under Corgi 3D, we've got a couple of demo levels, and what I've got open here is the new Corgi 3D. So that's this very 3D, or 2.5D as they call it, a 3D level. It's this side-scrolling look to the camera. And you can see with Maximize on Play turned on, if we play it, we've got this little Corgi character. I'll just turn down that volume a touch. And it's got all this lovely built-in functionality. We can double jump, wall jump. Whoops. Geez, it helps if I could. There you go, pick up. If I could play a game, would be useful. So pickups, we can see up here we've got a collector. We've got a health in the upper left there. We've got a sprint. We've got damage. I can kill that guy, and I can take damage, and I can kill him. So it's a nice little... Yeah, that springboard's cool. Platformers. And if we get to the end, there's a teleporter. So a nice little demo of some of the functionality. All I want to show you just before we jump in and bring our own asset in is how this is actually working is using 2D colliders. So if we look at this cube, what I'm going to do in my Gizmos pull down menu here is scroll down, just make sure I've got box colliders turned on. So box collider 2D, when I turn that on, you can see this green collider. So this collider is actually the shape of the object that the character is interacting with. So it actually doesn't, it is a 2D platformer, it doesn't care about the depth. What it cares about is that in Z space here, this collider is the shape of the character, so that when we're locked to the side, it's bouncing off that. So another example is for non-cubes, like this ramp, and that's exactly what we've modeled in this demo, is the polygon collider 2D. So a different type of collider. So instead of the box collider 2D for things that are square, when you have different shapes, you're going to need to use polygon collider 2D. And so we'll add this manually ourselves, but it's worth just taking a look at their demo and seeing how this works. Now, again, let's turn on. So it looks like I haven't got polygon collider turned on. There it is, polygon collider 2D. Oh, it is turned on, I just can't see it. So what I'll do is turn on this button here, which is Edit Collider. And so this is letting me change the shape of the collider, and you can see it's been shaped to the same as this triangle. Now if I were to make it like this, and turn off Edit, so I've got this weird shape. Let's just take a look and see what happens. If I play the game, we run up to where that collider is. He's not walking over the mesh at all. We don't care about the mesh, and I can't move left because there's an invisible collider in front of me at this shape. So what this means is when we import our models, we'll need to edit the collider and make sure it's the shape that we want. We'll also need to make sure that the object is aligned with the world. And that's something I'm going to demo in the following section. I'll bring in the asset the way I modeled it, which is actually not in the front view, but it's kind of worth seeing it done incorrectly so that you know how to fix it when you bring it in to work correctly. Now, inside of my Unity project, I've got a folder that I've called My Art, just a nice simple way that's not very obvious about what it is. And I've got models, prefabs, and textures. So what I'm going to do, I'll start by just loading it in here. I'll just right click, import new asset. I navigate to my location of where I've just exported those out of Substance Painter. I'm going to drag over all of them. So I've got my 3D model plus my 3 textures. Click import. And that loads them. Now we want to keep organized. So my 3D model, I drag into my models. So not under it, but make sure it's right inside that folder. We can see it in there now. And these 3 textures, I'm just shift selecting all 3, dragging them into textures. And now we want to set up this 3D model with a new material. So to do that, inside my textures _ materials, I'm going to right click and go create material, and then give it a name. So ramp, capital M matte. So that's just my ramp material. And what I need to do is for each one of these appropriate textures, assign the appropriate texture into the appropriate slot. So now if I click off this, it loses it. It's quite easy just to click and drag, but if you do want to not lose these each time you click off it, you can just click the lock icon. And so you can see now I can't lose that setting, but it's important to remember to unlock it. So anyway, what I want to do is select this ramp, and for the albedo, that's color, and it's called albedo. So I just click and drag into that channel. Metallic. And we can see, by the way, the type of shader is set by standard, by default, as the standard shader. I could change this to specular setup, but if you remember when we exported out of Substance Painter, we said metallic setup, which is the standard. The other option is changing it to specular setup, and I just need to make sure I changed the right shader. So just be aware that you are selecting the correct shader type. So metallic goes into metallic and smoothness by default, and then the normal goes into the normal. Now this will give us a little error that says, by the way, this is not marked as a normal map because this is a special texture that Unity needs to see identified as a normal map. So if I click Fix Now, that fixes that problem. In other words, this normal map is now marked as a normal map. Let's just change this setting here. Whereas these others are set as different types of textures and sprites. So that means I've got my material with the texture on it. What I need to do now is apply that to my 3D model. So here's the ramp. I can see that ramp. I can see my ramp material. I go to drag it on and it doesn't want to let me. So what I'm doing, select material, so what I'm going to do is drag this ramp into my scene. I'll just put it into the hierarchy because then it just appears at the middle of the world. I'll hit F to focus on it and just drag it up so I can see it. So it's a tiny little ramp, it's a tiny little asset because it's set to 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. If I come back to the 3D model, the scale factor, if we just scale that up, put in 100 and hit apply, that now converts that centimeters to meters. And so just selecting this ramp, I can drag it up and see it in the scene. I'm just going to hit E for my rotate tool and spin that around, or I can type in here 90 so it's a bit more accurate. So I can see my ramp. Now in this game I actually want this, I'm just going to put it right at the start of the level. Let's just completely remove these. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and select all of these pieces. So that's -90, face that way. And I might just scale it to the size I want. Make sure it's not sitting on the ground. And now what I can do is apply my material to the object. So we can see it's got that metallicness with the orange paint, plasticky paint effect on it. So that's working correctly. All I need to do now is make this a prefab. So at the moment I've got my textures and I've got my 3D model, but what I really want is, if I'm going to use this again at all, ever, I really should drag this into this setup and make this the original prefab, create a new original prefab, and drag this into my prefabs folder so it's nice and organized. And so now at any time I want to make another one, the whole lot with the textures is created, is working. There's only one problem. At the moment I don't have a collider. So if I were to play the game, you can see this cube that I've brought in earlier has a collider on it and stops. We can jump over, but this thing I just walk straight through, and that's a problem. So what I need to do is select the prefab, and just to show you why we care about prefabs, I can drag another prefab into my scene, and I'll just put it over here. Just type in 90, make sure it's aligned with my world. Because I've got multiple of them, I can change just the prefab and both of these will change. But what I need to do is add a collider. So add component, I'm going to type in poly, and it brings up Polygon Collider 2D. That's the type of collider I want for anything that's not a cube. For anything else I can use a box collider 2D, but for this mesh, Polygon Collider 2D. And so you'll see this object, which is ramp 01, has this polygon collider applied to it, as does this object, which is ramp, the other ramp 01, polygon collider. And of course now if we test it, oops, okay, we're not working. Okay, so you can see what the problem is here. If we take a look at our 3D model that we've made over here, when I click on the 2D, the edit collider, we can see the collider is at an angle. Now I can't actually adjust this. If I try and move it, it wants to move in this direction because it's a 2D collider, it's not a 3D collider. So the reason this is happening is that when I've made the model inside of Maya, it was rotated in order to line up. So I've made the model facing the wrong way. So we want to make sure that in Maya, we are creating our models to match. And this is kind of why we test, to make sure that things are working the way we think they are. I just want to point out here that there is an option to use the Pro Builder feature, which is now available as a part of Unity technologies. So you can add this using the package manager. This has a bunch of tools for doing basic operations on 3D modeling inside of Unity. So you don't actually need to go back to Maya for simple things. You could, for example, the freeze transformations tool inside of Pro Builder would allow you to reset such a simple object that we've made here. But it's important to understand the full pipeline in case you want to make more complex objects. This Pro Builder tool, it's really intended for prototyping. So it's for building a bunch of quick environment pieces, similar to what we've made in this tutorial, basic little ramps and cubes and ladders and things. If you want to start building complex objects, buildings, I don't know, windmills and garages or whatever sort of aspects you need to your environment, which of course is the sort of thing you're going to want to do to build a playable and interesting looking game, then you're going to need something more complex than Pro Builder. So maybe look into this if you're after some quick features, just to, for example, quickly reset the freeze transformations so that you don't need to have, once these are zeroed out by freezing transformations, the polygon collider 2D will be facing the correct direction, which will be really nice. So there is a quicker way to do it, but let's do it the better way for understanding the complete pipeline, which is going back to Maya and just building things correctly in the first place. So back in Maya, here's the original asset that I've made. And if I hold down space and my left mouse and go to front view, I can see from the front view it's facing the wrong way. So this matches Unity. What I need is this object to be facing the direction I want, which in this case is this way. Now, if we remember inside of Unity, this was 1 centimeter, and what we need is 100 centimeters. So if I can take that opportunity to fix this here, shift select all three of these scale and type in 100 and zoom out. So that's great. The problem now is I have these values inside of the channel box. If I export it as it is, when it goes into Unity, this will all be zeroed out. It will reset to how it just was. So I need all of these zeroed out before I export, which we do under Modify Freeze Transformations. So that resets everything here, leaving the shape in the same position and angle it was. And so now I can export this. We don't need to re-unwrap it, it's already unwrapped. We've got our textures, that all works. It's just the position and scale and rotation of the object was wrong. So export selection. In that same location, this time I'm going to incremental save. I'll export it as a new version. You don't want to override existing versions, that's going to break things. So always make a new version. Export selection. Oh, I have to actually select something to export a selection, don't I? So file, actually let's delete our history just to be safe. Delete all history. Export selection. Ramp02. Jump to Unity and we'll go right click in the project, import asset, Ramp02. Drag that into my scene. And straight away it's the right size. Note that the game is actually, this is the front view, so it is facing backwards, but not a big deal. I'll put one over here and we'll put the same material on it. And now this object I'll drag in to turn it into a prefab. And we'll add, actually let's just put this model in the model so I don't get confused, and the prefab into the prefabs. I'll add another prefab, and this one I want to spin around. So, what is it, 180? Oops. 180, there we go. Okay, now with these objects, if I select let's come back to the prefab. I haven't added my collider. So back to the prefab. Rampo 2, Poly, Collider 2D. And if I click on the Edit Collider, we can see this is the collider that it's created for us. I've got the same on this one. Now, that is the actual collider. You'll see what happens if we just play the game. At the moment, it's not working. There's one more step that we missed. So these ramps, these need to be set to, in our game when we add them, on a layer. So by default, it's the default layer. We need to set this to the platforms layer. So make sure this one's platforms layer. This is how Corgi Engine is set up. I want to just move this back so the character doesn't appear right on top of it. And so now that it's on the platforms layer, we hit it and the collider's working. But it's stopping because the collider's this crazy shape. So now we just need to edit that collider. So edit collider. And it's a bit tricky in this view. If I click 2D, it locks into 2D view. And I just want to move these points. Okay, go back to 3D view. I'll just update this prefab. I'll just remove those two and this one, so delete. So I've got this new prefab with the working collider on it. Put that into the prefabs folder. And so now that I've got this prefab, that should be, let's just spin that around. You can see it's kept that collider shape. So now we should be done. So we have our 3D object and we can walk up. And that's it. So that's how we can go about creating our own custom assets, replacing the existing assets inside of the Corgi engine with our own elements and get them set up so they're actually functional inside of Unity. So basically from there we can go through and build our entire level and customize it. We don't just want to replace the demo level that's provided to us with the Corgi engine. We want to obviously design our own gameplay. So typically I'd recommend you'd go through and just delete a whole bunch of this, but it's a really good reference point for starting out. So thanks for watching. I hope that helps you get started on your own game art journey. Let me know in the comments if there's any requests or ideas you have for future tutorials. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Thanks for watching and make some wonderful art.